Welcome back to our class on biblical families. We are, for this set of 13 lessons, using the Gospel Advocates Foundations Adult Bible Study Series, and we are following their outline for the 13 weeks and also following their outline for each individual lesson. So, want to make sure we give them credit each time, which we have been. This week, we are looking at Amram and Jochebed, and maybe you have not heard of them, and that would not be surprising, although you know quite a bit about Jochebed because she is the mother of Moses. So, and Amram and Jochebed are mentioned in several of the genealogies. They're actually mentioned in the book of Hebrews. And so we'll be looking at some of that today. Not only the parents of Moses, but also his brother and sister, Aaron and Miriam. And we'll be looking at those three siblings next week. So we'll be looking at Amram and Jochebed in this lesson, and our next lesson will focus in on Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, as you can see there on the outline. All right, so for our introduction today, the booklet does give some background concerning what happened between the time of Joseph and the time of Moses. And what has occurred is that Joseph, of course, has passed away, and now there's a Pharaoh in Egypt who never knew Joseph and is troubled by all these Jews and wants to stop the prolific way in which they are growing in size, growing in population. They are just growing and growing and growing down there in Goshen, the place where the Pharaoh in the time of Egypt, in the time of Joseph, allowed his family to stay, and now they are just increasing so greatly that the Pharaoh is concerned, and so he has enslaved them, and this is part of the 400 and some years that the Jewish people spent Abraham's descendants spent there in the land of Egypt. And Moses, God is going to use him to help the people break free, to get them back home to the promised land. And so, before we even get to our main parts of the text, I do want to point out where we have Amram's and Jochebed's names. And one of those is in this genealogy. You'll notice, and you would have guessed this because of Aaron, Moses' brother, but both Jochebed and Amram are of the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe. And so makes sense because Aaron was one of the priests. So, all right, here we go. Exodus 6, starting in 14. These are the heads of their fathers' houses. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, or Jacob, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. These are the clans of Reuben. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the clans of Simeon. And then, because of the focus on Moses in the book of Exodus, we have a lot more concerning the tribe of Levi or the son Levi of Jacob or Israel. So, 16, these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The years of the life of Levi being 137 years. The sons of Gershon, so these would be Levi's grandchildren, Libni and Shammai, by their clans. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Aziel. The years of the life of Kohath being 133 years. The sons of Merari, Mali and Mushi. These are the clans of the Levites according to their generations. So notice in verse 18, One of the sons of Kohath is Amram. And so now in verse 20, we shift to him. Amram took as his wife Jochebed, his father's sister, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. The years of the life of Amram being 137 years. The sons of Izhar, Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Aziel, Mishael, Elzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron took as his wife Elisheba, the daughter of Amminadab and the sister of Nahshon, and she bore him Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. And you'll recognize some of those names. Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, um, other priests. And also look in verse 21 at the name Korah, and there's going to be a little um, information given about him in verse 24. The sons of Korah, Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. These are the clans of the Korahites. Some of the Psalms are written by the sons of Korah, or the generations of Korah. And so, very, very interesting. Eleazar, Aaron's son, took as his wife one of the daughters of Putiel, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites by their clans. And then two more verses here. These are the Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their hosts. It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing out the people of Israel from Egypt. This Moses and this Aaron. All right, so the Moses emphasizing that these are the ones right here that brought the children of Israel, the descendants of Jacob, out of Egypt. All right, and then in Numbers, we have another uh, portion of genealogy that I want to note, and really kind of the same information for us, specifically looking at Amram and Jochebed. So Numbers 26, 57 to 65. This was the list of the Levites according to their clans. Of Gershon, the clan of the Gershonites. Of Kohath, the clan of the Kohathites. Of Merari, the clan of the Merarites. These are the clans of Levi. The clan of the Libnites, the clan of the Hebronites, the clan of the Malites, the clan of the Mushites, the clan of the Korites, and Korhath was the father of Amram. And once again, we get some more details about Amram and his wife because of the emphasis of Moses in Exodus, but also throughout the whole first 5 books of the Bible. The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. And she bore to Amram Aaron and Moses and Miriam, their sister. And to Aaron were born Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. But Nadab and Abihu died when they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord. And those listed were 23,000, every male from a month old and upward. For they were not listed among the people of Israel, because there was no inheritance given to them among the people of Israel. These were those listed by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who listed the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. But among these there was not one of those listed by Moses and Aaron the priest, who had listed the people of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said of them, they shall die in the wilderness. Not one of them was left, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. And you may be wondering why Joshua and Caleb were able to enter the promised land, why they were not killed off in the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And that is because they were the 2 of the 12 spies who came back with faith in the Lord, that God could deliver the people and give to them the promised land. The other 10 did not believe, and the people went with the 10, and all those people during the 40 years of wandering died off. All right, so let's get to our lesson for today. Amram and Jochebed. All right, so first of all, we will see that there is trouble in Egypt. And we're not just going to read verses 8 through 20, although that is the assigned text for this section. We're going to look at the whole of chapter 1. We'll read verses 1 through 7, and we'll also read the last couple verses. And then the birth of Moses in chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. And then we'll continue in verses 7 through 10, looking at Moses hid and found. And that's when we'll jump to the book of Hebrews and check out Hebrews 11:23 to 25. What we are going to see is that Amram and Jochebed are people of faith. Jochebed, when she has Moses, and Moses is supposed to be thrown into the Nile, is supposed to be killed along with all the other baby boys of that time. Jochebed is not going to do that. She puts Moses in the basket and sends him down the Nile River. And of course, Pharaoh's daughter finds him. And after he is weaned, Moses is raised in Pharaoh's house. And I'll just go ahead and mention now. So Moses, until he was weaned, and that could have been a year or two or three even, it was just a different culture, a different time. There are still places in the world today where babies nurse for that length of time. And so we don't know exactly, but Moses was old enough to have a feeling of loyalty to his people. We find this out later in the book of Exodus, and not too much later, but just later in his life. He's an adult by this time, and he stands up for his people, and he makes the determination that he is not going to stay in Pharaoh's household. He's going to support his people, and ends up, of course, running off to Midian, where he'll be for decades. But anyway, so he's at the house, so he has the full education, and we wouldn't say full because I'm sure he was not there till he was 12-ish, but he had quite a bit of education concerning God Almighty and the idea of faith and what it looks like to be a faithful couple, Amram and Jochebed, being married and raising Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. But then also, he had the full education. Let's say that around 3, 4, 5, 6, he heads into Pharaoh's household to be raised by Pharaoh's daughter. Well, he would have had the full education of the Egyptians. And the Egyptians were well educated. He would have been educated in reading and writing, probably with other languages besides Egyptian, mathematics, literature, just all sorts of different things, science. And so Moses was well equipped by the time he comes back to lead God's people out of Egypt. He would have been well equipped educationally and, of course, with the stamina and the resolve to do what God wanted. All right, so let's dive into this idea of trouble in Egypt. Of course, this is trouble for God's people, trouble for the nation of Israel. All right, so we will start in the beginning. All right, first of all, Exodus 1, 1 through 7. These are the names of the sons of Israel. And again, when you read that, sons of Jacob, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And just incidentally, Reuben was the firstborn. Judah is the line through which Jesus Christ came. That is the line that leads to David, leads all the way down to Joseph and Mary. Um, Levi, of course, the priestly tribe. Verse 3, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. So they all die off. Verse 7. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. And now our text, starting in verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. All right, so they are having more put on them. They are being afflicted with heavy burdens. We're told here in the text, they built two cities for Pharaoh and the Egyptians. But notice what God does. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. It's really, really incredible. Um, the more they did, the more God blessed his people, and the more they grew in number and spread around the land of Goshen, and I'm sure even beyond that, as they were into the hundreds of thousands by this point. So just incredible. Um, Ruthlessly, we have that word in here twice. They were being mistreated for sure. Verse 15. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. I mean, it would, I can't imagine a midwife being able to kill all these children. This makes sense here. They are all about helping babies live. They are all about new life. Midwives are not about death. And so we see that coming through here. And of course, their faith, the fact that they were God-fearers. They were not like possibly the Egyptians that just didn't care about the sanctity of human life. And so the midwives were not willing to do this. So, verse 18, the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. The midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. All right, so God is pleased with the midwives. He is pleased with the fact, of course, that they're not killing children. And so God dealt well with them. And then two more verses in this chapter. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. All right, so Pharaoh is tired of the midwives not doing what he wanted, and he commands all people throw these Hebrew male children into the Nile. We are going to kill them off. But again, he does say that they can let the daughters live. All right, so let's look at the next section of our lesson for today, the birth of Moses. And so all this leads up to chapter 2 and his birth. Verses 1 through 6 to begin. Now, a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife, a Levite woman. And we know from the genealogies, this is Amram, and the wife is Jochebed. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, and some of your versions will say beautiful, the word can mean either, that he was a beautiful child, that he was a fine child, um, that he was the way a child should be. She hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She just sealed this, kind of like Noah did with the ark, although this obviously much smaller. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." So Jochebed decides to put Moses in the basket, lay him in the Nile. The booklet kind of points out that in a kind of roundabout way, this is kind of actually following Pharaoh's order. She didn't throw him in the river, but she put him in the river, and obviously with not the intention to kill Moses, but to hope that he would somehow make it and be saved. So anyway, and of course that happens, and we have our whole story of Moses. But anyway, so Jochebed is doing this. His sister is heading down to see what happens with the basket. Pharaoh's daughter finds the child and took pity. Took pity. So, um, all right. So let's continue on. Verses 7 through 10 of this same chapter. Moses hid and found. All right. So starting in 7. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, and we're not told this is Miriam, but I think we can assume it's Miriam. But it could be another child that Amram and Jochebed had already had. But then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. So Jochebed comes, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. All right. So I mean, pretty incredible, right? And you just have to wonder if there's a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, you got to wonder if Pharaoh kind of knew that this was the child's mother, and they're just, you know, both kind of playing along with each other. And Pharaoh's daughter just wants to have a child, wants to um, raise this boy. And so, regardless of how all that went down, bottom line is God obviously is involved in this and allowed Moses to be essentially raised for at least the first few years by his own parents and in his own household. And so pretty awesome. And to boot, they're getting paid by Pharaoh's household. Pharaoh's daughter is going to pay her for doing this. So, really incredible, really awesome. Um, God providing financial support to Moses' family, as well as keeping Moses alive, obviously. All right, and then one more verse in this section, verse 10. When the child grew older, and again, we don't know the age. It's just an interesting thing. It would be interesting to know the age. But when the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. All right, it's so amazing, so cool. The beginning here of Moses' life and what he had gone through. I shouldn't say what he had gone through, but what the family had gone through. All right, let's go to Hebrews chapter 11. The Hebrew writer, of course, in this chapter is going through a catalog of the people of faith. And in verse 23, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. And then continuing on, that's the one that really applies to this lesson. But continuing on, verse 24 and 25, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. And just a great example for us here. This is kind of the way that we're living life as Christians today. This is not our home. We are citizens of heaven. We are citizens of the kingdom. And so we're sojourners. We are travelers. We are pilgrims here in this life. And we choose that. We choose to follow God. We choose to be people of faith. We choose to be mistreated as Christians rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. The pleasures of sin are just for a moment, especially when you look at it compared to eternity. So it's worth living a good life here. And it's, of course, in response to what God has done for us through Christ. All right, there are two applications for today's lesson. From our perspective, it is easy to see the hand of God at work in the salvation of baby Moses. He was born and hidden from Pharaoh, saved by being cast into the Nile River, found by Pharaoh's daughter, and nursed and reared by his own mother. To attribute these events to chance is nonsensical. God remained in control all along. Through his providence, Moses was protected and prepared to deliver Israel. If anything, we need to be reminded of God's continued care for his children. At the same time, we must also acknowledge the important role Amram and Jochebed played in the process. They were willing to obey God and teach their son to do the same. Parents today must do no less. And then application 2, Moses' ability to live as if seeing him who is invisible is significant. Hebrews 11:27. He did not learn this in the palace of Egypt. His loving, faithful mother taught him this. Individuals often live one way when being watched and another when they think no one is looking. God, however, is always aware of our actions. We should follow Moses' example and walk by faith. And we should do what we can to teach our children this very important lesson. All right, so let's continue in Hebrews with the next verses, and it's referenced here in this application. Then we'll look at the Second Corinthians passage as well. So Hebrews 11, picking up in 26, he considered the reproach of Christ, in other words, the reproach or the suffering that belongs to one who is in Christ. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. All right, that obviously looking forward to what happens when Moses comes back and leads the people out of Egypt. All right, and let's also look at 2 Corinthians 5, not just verse 7, but 6 through 10. So we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we're at home or away, we make it our aim to please him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. A good reminder for us to stay courageous, but also to remember that we have an eternal home. We are heading there. Let's stay faithful, stay true to our Lord. All right. And then there are a few discussion questions for today. And as always, I encourage you to pause the video and think about these things. If you're watching with someone else, pause and have a discussion about these things. Number one, what can the example of the Hebrew midwives teach us about civil disobedience? And number two, what can we learn about parenting from Amram and Jochebed? All right, so just two today. Next week, as we already mentioned, we will look at Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. May God continue to bless us and keep us as we study his amazing word.